I sat in that suffocating courtroom watching my father Douglas demand every cent of my mother's estate, while Judge Harrison smirked like they were sharing some private joke. The mahogany-paneled walls seemed to close in as Douglas's lawyer waved forged documents claiming I had abandoned our family bakery. Sweet Dreams Bakery had been my second home since age 12, where Mom and I created magic with flour and love. Now these men wanted to erase my existence from our family legacy. The gallery whispered about the ungrateful daughter who dared challenge her grieving father. But my fingers wrapped around the small recording device hidden in my pocket. Soon I would whisper just 2 words that would shatter their conspiracy and expose 20 years of calculated betrayal. 3 months earlier, my world collapsed when I found Mom Patricia lifeless in our kitchen, her hand still reaching toward her heart medication. The paramedics said massive heart attack, sudden and brutal. At 32, I thought I understood grief, but nothing prepared me for the hollow ache of losing the woman who taught me everything about resilience and kindness. The funeral felt surreal. Douglas played the devastated widower, perfectly accepting condolences, while I struggled to breathe through my tears. Our small Indiana town rallied around him, bringing casseroles and sympathy cards. Everyone praised how devoted he had been to Patricia during their 25 years of marriage. 2 weeks later, Mom's lawyer, Mr. Brennan, called me to his dusty downtown office. His hands trembled as he opened the manila envelope containing Mom's handwritten will. "Meghan, your mother left Sweet Dreams Bakery entirely to you," he announced, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses nervously. I stared at the familiar cursive spelling out my inheritance. The bakery that had fed our family for 3 generations, where I had learned to measure ingredients by heart and comfort customers with warm smiles. Mom's note explained everything. Meghan has been my true partner since she was 12 years old. She knows every recipe, every customer, every dream we built together. The bakery belongs to her heart as much as mine. That evening, Douglas exploded when I mentioned the will. His face flushed crimson as he paced our living room, knocking over Mom's ceramic angels. "That bakery is mine. I built it from nothing while Patricia played house with her little recipes." I had never seen this rage before. Throughout my childhood, Douglas seemed like a mild-mannered insurance salesman who enjoyed weekend golf and evening cocktails. Sure, he disappeared for hours sometimes and came home smelling like whiskey and disappointment, but Mom always covered for him with gentle excuses. "Dad, the will is clear. Mom wanted me to continue her legacy." "Legacy." His laugh turned bitter. "I put my name on every loan, every lease, every insurance policy. Without me, there would be no bakery for you to inherit." But I remembered differently. I recalled countless afternoons helping Mom balance books while Douglas watched television. I remembered her worried expressions when bills arrived and her relief when bakery income covered them. I remembered her working 16-hour days during Christmas season while Douglas complained about missing golf tournaments. The next morning, Douglas filed legal papers contesting the will. Mr. Brennan called with defeat in his voice. "Meghan, your father claims the handwritten will is invalid. He's arguing that he built the business and deserves everything." My hand shook as I hung up the phone. This couldn't be happening. Mom had poured her soul into Sweet Dreams Bakery, perfecting recipes that brought joy to thousands of customers. The cinnamon rolls that sold out every Tuesday, the birthday cakes that marked every celebration in town, the wedding cookies that sweetened new beginnings. I drove to the bakery that afternoon, needing to touch the stainless steel counters where Mom and I had created memories. But Douglas had already changed the locks. A handwritten sign read, "Close due to family emergency." Through the windows, I could see boxes stacked everywhere as if someone was preparing to pack up 20 years of carefully organized supplies. Mrs. Chen, our neighbor who had been Mom's closest friend, found me crying in the parking lot. Her weathered hands wrapped around mine as she shared what I desperately needed to hear. "Your mother knew this day would come, sweetheart. She spoke about it during our last tea together." "What do you mean?" "Patricia suspected Douglas was planning something terrible. She said he had been acting strange, making secretive phone calls and asking unusual questions about the business paperwork. That evening, I searched Mom's bedroom for any clues about what she might have suspected. In her jewelry box, hidden beneath her grandmother's pearls, I found a small leather journal. The entries revealed a side of my father I had never imagined. March 5th. Douglas borrowed money again without telling me. Found withdrawal slip for $3,000. When I asked, he claimed it was for bakery equipment, but we haven't purchased anything new in months. April 15th caught Douglas on phone with someone discussing when the old lady finally goes. He hung up quickly when he saw me listening. My chest has been hurting more lately. Wonder if stress is making my heart condition worse. May 20th. Douglas asked how much life insurance I carry. Strange question since he's never shown interest in financial planning before. Also noticed he's been meeting someone at Murphy's Bar every Thursday. Never invites me anymore. Each entry painted a picture of calculated deception. Mom had been documenting Douglas's suspicious behavior for months, as if she sensed danger approaching. The final entry, dated just 2 days before her death, made my blood run cold. June 10th. Found Douglas going through my purse last night. He claimed he was looking for aspirin, but my medication was moved. The pills looked different somehow. Planning to speak with Dr. Morrison tomorrow about changing my heart medication. Something feels wrong, but I can't prove anything yet. She never made it to that appointment. I closed the journal with trembling fingers, realizing Mom had been trying to protect herself and our family legacy. But from what and why hadn't she told me about her suspicions? The next shock came when I discovered Douglas had been meeting regularly with Judge Harrison at the Riverside Country Club. Mrs. Peterson, who worked in the club's restaurant, mentioned seeing them huddled together over drinks every Friday afternoon for the past 2 months. They always looked so serious, she confided while shopping at the grocery store. Your father kept showing Judge Harrison papers and pointing at different sections. I thought maybe it was golf tournament planning, but they never went to the course afterward. Judge Harrison was supposed to oversee our inheritance case impartially. If he was already discussing the situation with Douglas privately, I was facing a rigged system from the beginning. That night I called my college roommate Sarah Martinez, now a successful lawyer in Indianapolis. Through tears, I explained my impossible situation. "Sarah, I think my father is stealing everything Mom built and the judge is helping him do it." "Slow down, Meghan. Tell me everything from the beginning." After hearing the full story, Sarah's voice carried new urgency. "This sounds like conspiracy and fraud, possibly worse. I'm driving down tomorrow morning. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and don't meet with your father alone." As I hung up the phone, I felt the first spark of hope since Mom's death. Maybe I wasn't completely powerless after all. But then I heard Douglas's car pulling into our driveway, and through the window I saw him talking animatedly on his cell phone. "Don't worry, Harrison. The girl doesn't suspect anything. After you rule in my favor next week, I'll make that generous contribution to your re-election campaign just like we discussed." My heart stopped. Douglas was bribing Judge Harrison with campaign donations in exchange for a favorable ruling. Everything was orchestrated, planned, and paid for before I even knew there was a fight to be had. I was completely alone facing a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of our small town's power structure. But Mom's journal entries had taught me something important. Sometimes the people closest to you are gathering evidence for battles you don't even know you're fighting. Sarah Martinez arrived the next morning like a force of nature, her designer briefcase contrasting sharply with our small town's casual atmosphere. At 34, she had built a reputation for taking on impossible cases and winning through meticulous preparation and fearless advocacy. "Meghan, we're dealing with more than a simple inheritance dispute," she announced after reviewing Mom's journal and the legal papers. "Your father is attempting systematic theft, and he's using the court system to legitimize his crimes." We spent the afternoon gathering documentation from the bakery's financial records. Sarah's trained eye immediately spotted irregularities that I had missed. For the past 2 years, Douglas had been creating fake vendor accounts and diverting bakery profits into personal bank accounts. "Look at these monthly payments to Sunshine Supply Company." Sarah pointed to a series of $800 withdrawals. "That company doesn't exist. I ran the registration numbers through the state database." The pattern was sophisticated and deliberate. Douglas had been stealing approximately $2,000 monthly from the bakery's revenue, disguising the theft as legitimate business expenses. Over 24 months, he had embezzled nearly $50,000 from the business Mom thought was thriving. We discovered even more disturbing evidence when Sarah convinced the bank manager to show us loan applications. Douglas had secretly borrowed $120,000, using the bakery as collateral, forging Mom's signature on the guarantee documents. "Your mother never knew about this debt," the manager admitted reluctantly. Mr. Douglas handled all the paperwork himself and specifically requested that statements be mailed to his office address rather than your home. The money had disappeared into Douglas's gambling activities at Riverboat Casino 90 minutes away in Michigan City. Sarah's private investigator confirmed that Douglas was a regular at the high-stakes poker tables, known among dealers as someone who bet recklessly and lost consistently. But the most devastating discovery came when we found evidence that Douglas had already signed preliminary papers to sell Sweet Dreams Bakery to Midwest Hospitality Corporation, a chain that bought family businesses and converted them into generic fast food outlets. "He's planning to pocket the sale proceeds and disappear," Sarah explained, reviewing the purchase agreement. "This contract gives him complete authority to finalize the transaction immediately after gaining legal ownership." I felt physically sick imagining our beloved bakery transformed into another soulless franchise, serving artificial ingredients and assembly line mediocrity. Mom's handcrafted recipes, developed over decades of experimentation and refinement, would be replaced by industrial formulas designed for profit margins rather than flavor or nutrition. Meanwhile, Douglas escalated his public relations campaign against me. The local newspaper ran a front-page story titled, "Grieving Father Fights Ungrateful Daughter's Greed." The article painted me as a spoiled child who had never contributed meaningfully to the family business and was now trying to steal her hard-working father's life achievements. Douglas Edwards built Sweet Dreams Bakery from nothing 25 years ago, the reporter wrote without bothering to verify basic facts. Now his daughter Meghan is using emotional manipulation and legal technicalities to rob him of everything he's worked to create. The story quoted several supposed longtime customers who claimed they had never seen me working at the bakery and described Douglas as the heart and soul of the operation. I recognized none of these people, which made me wonder if they even existed or if Douglas had paid actors to provide false testimonials. The social pressure became unbearable quickly. Former high school friends crossed the street to avoid speaking with me. The grocery store clerk, who had known me since childhood, suddenly treated me with cold formality. Even our mailman started leaving packages on the porch instead of ringing the doorbell for friendly conversations. Douglas obtained a restraining order preventing me from entering the bakery property. Judge Harrison signed the order without requiring a hearing or allowing me to present opposing evidence. The legal justification claimed I posed a threat to business operations and employee safety based entirely on Douglas's sworn statement that I had become increasingly unstable and aggressive. I watched helplessly as Douglas systematically destroyed everything Mom had built with such careful devotion. He fired longtime employees who expressed loyalty to Patricia's memory, replacing them with inexperienced workers who followed his cost-cutting directives without question. The signature cinnamon rolls that customers had treasured for 20 years became dry and flavorless when Douglas substituted cheap margarine for real butter. The chocolate chip cookies lost their distinctive texture when he replaced premium Belgian chocolate with processed chips that contained more artificial ingredients than actual cocoa. Regular customers began complaining about the declining quality, but Douglas dismissed their concerns with contempt. "People eat with their eyes, not their taste buds," he told the remaining staff. "As long as the products look acceptable, no one will pay enough attention to notice the difference." He was wrong. Sweet Dreams Bakery had built its reputation on exceptional quality that customers could taste in every bite. When that quality disappeared, so did customer loyalty. Daily sales dropped by 40% within 3 weeks, as families who had been weekly regulars stopped visiting entirely. But Douglas had a solution for the financial shortfall. He announced plans to expand catering services and focus on wedding cakes areas where Mom had always maintained the highest standards for both ingredients and presentation. "Oh, Ma, we're going to streamline operations and increase profit margins," he declared at a staff meeting. "No more wasting money on premium ingredients that customers can't distinguish anyway." I learned about this travesty from Betty Rodriguez, one of Mom's trusted decorators who had been crafting wedding cakes for 15 years. Betty called me in tears after Douglas showed her the new recipes he wanted to implement. "Meghan, these formulas use boxed cake mixes and artificial flavoring," Betty sobbed. "Your mother spent years developing our signature recipes using real vanilla extract, farm-fresh eggs, and European-style flour. These shortcuts will ruin our reputation permanently." Betty faced an impossible choice: implement Douglas's inferior standards and watch her professional reputation crumble, or quit her job and lose health insurance for her disabled husband. She chose to stay and follow orders, but her heart was breaking with every wedding cake she was forced to create using substandard ingredients. The situation reached a new level of crisis when Sarah discovered that Douglas had forged my signature on several loan modification papers, making me personally liable for his gambling debts. Creditors had begun calling our house, demanding payments on obligations I never knew existed. "Your father has made you responsible for approximately $80,000 in casino debt," Sarah explained grimly. "If we can't prove fraud, you could lose everything even if we win the inheritance case." The pressure was suffocating. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't concentrate on anything except the growing certainty that Douglas was going to succeed in destroying my family's legacy while making me pay for his crimes. Then Sarah received a phone call that changed everything. Her voice was tight with controlled anger when she hung up. "Someone just threatened my paralegal, telling her that I should drop your case if I know what's good for my career. They mentioned specific details about my other clients and my home address." We both realized that Douglas's conspiracy reached further than we had imagined. This wasn't just about stealing an inheritance anymore. People were willing to use intimidation and violence to protect whatever secret they were hiding. That night, someone threw a brick through my bedroom window. Attached was a note written in block letters: "Stop fighting or face consequences." I stared at the broken glass scattered across my childhood quilt, understanding that my father was prepared to destroy me completely rather than allow the truth to come to light. But what truth was worth threatening physical violence to protect? The answer would prove more horrifying than I could have imagined. The morning after the brick incident, Sarah arrived with a team of investigators and a new urgency in her approach. Meghan were no longer dealing with simple inheritance fraud. Someone is scared enough to commit felonies to keep us from uncovering their secrets. Our first breakthrough came when Sarah's technology expert analyzed Mom's computer and found deleted browser histories showing extensive research about heart medication interactions and symptoms of medication tampering. Mom had been investigating whether someone was interfering with her prescriptions. Look at these search terms. The investigator pointed to recovered data. She was specifically looking up information about digitalis substitution and placebo medications. Someone with medical training helped her research this. We drove to Westfield Pharmacy where Mom had filled prescriptions for 15 years. The pharmacist, Mr. Kumar, seemed nervous when we asked about Patricia's final medication refill. His hands shook as he pulled up her prescription history on his computer. Mrs. Edwards picked up her heart medication on June 8th, 2 days before she passed, he confirmed. Everything appeared normal with the prescription. But Sarah noticed something suspicious in the pharmacy's security camera positioning. That camera angle should show the prescription filling area clearly, but it's been adjusted to miss that workspace entirely. We asked to speak with the pharmacy technician who had filled Mom's prescription. Mr. Kumar claimed that employee no longer worked there and had moved out of state, leaving no forwarding address. When Sarah requested employment records suddenly, the pharmacy's computer system experienced mysterious technical difficulties. Someone doesn't want us finding that technician, Sarah concluded as we left the pharmacy. We need to dig deeper into Douglas's connections. The investigation led us to Riverboat Casino, where Douglas's gambling activities had escalated dramatically in recent months. The casino manager reluctantly admitted that Douglas owed substantial money to people who weren't patient about collecting debts. Your father borrowed from private lenders when the casino stopped extending credit, the manager explained. These individuals don't use traditional collection methods. We discovered that Douglas had borrowed over $300,000 from loan sharks who charged weekly interest rates that made repayment nearly impossible. The pressure to find money had become desperate, providing clear motive for stealing Mom's estate. But the casino manager revealed something even more disturbing. Judge Harrison gambles here too. In fact, he owes our establishment approximately $75,000. We've been waiting patiently because of his judicial position, but our patience isn't unlimited. Sarah and I exchanged shocked glances. Judge Harrison wasn't just Douglas's golf buddy accepting campaign donations. He was also trapped in the same cycle of gambling debt, making him vulnerable to manipulation and bribery. When was Judge Harrison's last visit to the casino? Sarah asked. 3 days ago. He met with your father in our VIP lounge for about 2 hours. They seemed to be discussing paperwork and making some kind of agreement. The conspiracy was expanding beyond simple inheritance theft. Both Douglas and Judge Harrison were desperate men facing dangerous creditors, willing to commit whatever crimes necessary to solve their financial problems. Our investigation took a shocking turn when we discovered Douglas's new girlfriend, Cindy, wasn't who she claimed to be. Sarah's background check revealed that Cindy Morrison was actually Cynthia Rodriguez, a professional con artist with arrest records in 4 states. She specializes in targeting recently widowed men with substantial assets. Sarah explained, showing me police reports from Colorado and Nevada. Her pattern involves befriending the target, encouraging risky financial decisions, then disappearing with whatever money she can steal. Cindy had been working on Douglas for 8 months, dating back to before Mom's death. Photos from her social media accounts showed her attending casino events with Douglas, while Mom was still alive, proving that their relationship began as an affair. The timeline suggested that Cindy had been coaching Douglas on how to steal the bakery inheritance using methods she had perfected with previous victims. Her involvement explained the sophisticated nature of Douglas's financial schemes and legal maneuvering. We found evidence that Cindy had been researching Patricia's health conditions and medication requirements, suggesting she helped plan whatever happened to Mom's heart medication. Her internet searches included detailed information about cardiac drugs, their side effects and methods for altering prescription medications without detection. But our most disturbing discovery came from Frank Douglas's younger brother, who lived on a family farm 30 miles outside town. Frank called me in a panic after discovering that Douglas had used the farm as collateral for additional loans without his knowledge or consent. "Meghan, I found these papers in our parents' old desk," Frank explained, his voice shaking with rage and fear. "Douglas forged my signature on loan documents worth $200,000. If he can't repay this money, they'll take our family's farm." The farm had been in their family for 4 generations, representing everything Frank cared about in life. Douglas had stolen not just my inheritance, but also his own brother's legacy, proving that no family bond was sacred when money was involved. Frank revealed additional information that made our situation even more dire. "Douglas called last week asking about selling the farm quickly. He claimed you were demanding money from him, and he needed to liquidate assets to pay legal fees. Douglas was already planning to flee town with Cindy, leaving destroyed lives and unpaid debts behind them. The urgency of stopping them before they could complete their escape plan added new pressure to our legal timeline. Sarah discovered that Judge Harrison's wife had her own secrets that tied into the conspiracy. Mrs. Harrison operated a small business consulting firm that had recently signed a lucrative contract with Midwest Hospitality Corporation, the same company planning to buy Sweet Dreams Bakery. She's been paid $50,000 as a consulting fee for a project that doesn't seem to exist, Sarah explained. This is clearly a bribe disguised as legitimate business income. The web of corruption extended through multiple families and businesses, all connected by greed and mutual blackmail. Everyone involved had committed crimes that made them vulnerable to exposure, creating a conspiracy of silence that protected the entire group. But we had uncovered one piece of evidence that could potentially expose everything Mom's hidden safety deposit box at First National Bank. The bank manager confirmed that Patricia had rented the box 3 months before her death, visiting it frequently during her final weeks. Mrs. Edwards was very specific about the access requirements, the manager explained. She wanted the box opened only in the presence of her daughter and an attorney, never under any circumstances with her husband present. Sarah and I sat in the bank's private viewing room as the manager brought the safety deposit box. My hands trembled as I inserted Mom's key, wondering what final message she had left for me. Inside, we found documentation that proved Mom had discovered everything: Douglas's embezzlement, his gambling debts, his affair with Cindy, and his plans to steal her estate. She had gathered bank statements, pharmacy records, photographs of Douglas and Cindy together, and detailed financial records showing every fraudulent transaction. But the most shocking item was an audio recording device containing what appeared to be Mom's final conversations with Douglas. Her voice was weak but determined as she confronted him about his betrayal. "I know about the money you've stolen, about your gambling, about that woman," Mom's recorded voice explained calmly. "I know you've been planning to take everything after I die. But I've documented every crime you've committed, and Meghan will make sure justice is served." Douglas's response was cold and calculating. "Patricia, you're not going to live long enough to cause any problems. Your heart medication has been adjusted to ensure that." The recording device fell from my shaking hands as the full horror of what had happened became clear. Douglas hadn't just stolen money and planned fraud. He had murdered my mother through systematic medication tampering, essentially poisoning her slowly, while she documented his crimes. Sarah's face was pale as she realized we were no longer investigating inheritance theft. We were dealing with premeditated murder conspiracy and a cover-up that involved courthouse officials and local businesses. "Meghan, this recording changes everything," Sarah whispered. "Your mother knew she was dying, and she spent her final weeks building a case to protect you and expose her killers." Mom's final act of love had been gathering evidence to ensure that justice would eventually triumph over the conspiracy that had destroyed our family. But using this evidence would require surviving long enough to present it in court, assuming we could find an honest judge willing to hear the truth. Cha. As we left the bank with Mom's documentation, I noticed the same dark sedan that had been following us for several days. The driver's face was hidden behind sunglasses, but his presence confirmed that our investigation was being monitored by people who would do anything to protect their secrets. The final confrontation was approaching, and I wasn't sure any of us would survive to see justice served. The morning after discovering Mom's safety deposit box, our investigation took a terrifying turn. Sarah's pharmacy expert confirmed that the pills in Mom's final prescription bottle contained lactose placebos instead of the life-saving digitalis her heart condition required. Someone with access to the pharmacy's compounding area switched her medication, the expert explained. This required knowledge of pharmaceutical processes and timing that suggests inside help. We discovered that Tommy Walsh, the missing pharmacy technician, had gambling debts at the same casino where Douglas played. Bank records showed Tommy received $5,000 from Douglas's account 3 days before Mom's death payment for services that had no legitimate explanation. "Tommy disappeared the morning after your mother died," Sarah's investigator reported. "His landlord said he packed everything overnight and left no forwarding address, but we traced his cell phone to a motel in Las Vegas." Sarah immediately filed paperwork for federal involvement since Tommy had crossed state lines, and the crime involved medication tampering that fell under FDA jurisdiction. But before federal agents could locate him, Tommy Walsh was found dead in his motel room, apparently from a drug overdose. "Convenient timing," Sarah said grimly after receiving the coroner's report. "Tommy was the only person who could directly testify about switching your mother's medication. Now that evidence is gone forever." The conspiracy was eliminating witnesses, systematically proving that people were willing to commit multiple murders to protect their secrets. The stakes had escalated beyond anything we had imagined when this started as a simple inheritance dispute. Our next shock came from an unexpected source. Dr. Morrison, Mom's cardiologist, called to request a private meeting. His voice carried fear and guilt, as he admitted knowing more about Mom's death than he had revealed initially. "Meghan, your mother came to see me 2 weeks before she died," Dr. Morrison confessed during our clandestine meeting in his empty office. "She suspected someone was tampering with her medication because her symptoms weren't responding to treatment properly." "Why didn't you report this to police when she died?" Dr. Morrison's hands shook as he explained the pressure he had faced. "Judge Harrison's wife called my office the day after Patricia's death. She reminded me that my medical license renewal was pending review by the state board, where Judge Harrison has significant influence. The message was clear: keep quiet or face professional destruction." The corruption reached into every institution that should have protected Mom and delivered justice after her murder. The medical community, the legal system, and local business networks had all been compromised by fear and bribery. But Dr. Morrison had kept copies of Mom's medical records and his private notes documenting her concerns about medication tampering. "Patricia was the intelligent woman who understood her condition thoroughly," he explained. When she described symptoms that didn't match her prescribed medication, I should have investigated immediately instead of dismissing her concerns. His guilt over failing to protect Mom motivated him to provide crucial evidence that could prove premeditated murder. The medical documentation showed a clear pattern of declining health that coincided exactly with when her medication was switched to placebos. Sarah filed emergency motions to delay the inheritance hearing while we gathered additional evidence, but Judge Harrison denied every request. He scheduled the final hearing for the following week, clearly intending to rule quickly in Douglas's favor before federal investigators could intervene. He's rushing the timeline because he knows we're getting close to exposing everything, Sarah explained. Once Douglas legally owns the bakery and sells it to Midwest Hospitality, they can claim the entire transaction was legitimate regardless of what evidence we present later. We discovered that several other people in town had suffered mysterious deaths or financial disasters after crossing Douglas or Judge Harrison. Mrs. Patterson, who had opposed a zoning change that benefited the judge's property investments, died in a suspicious car accident 6 months earlier. Mr. Gonzalez, who had filed complaints about courthouse corruption, lost his business when the health department suddenly found violations that no previous inspections had detected. They've been systematically eliminating opposition for years, Sarah realized. Your mother's murder wasn't their first crime, just their most recent. The pattern suggested a criminal organization that had been operating with impunity because they controlled key positions in local government. Anyone who challenged their authority faced economic destruction, legal harassment, or worse consequences. Our investigation suffered another setback when someone broke into Sarah's Indianapolis office and stole files related to our case. The burglary was professional, targeting only documents connected to Douglas and leaving valuable equipment untouched. They know exactly what evidence we have, Sarah said after surveying the damage. Someone with detailed knowledge of our investigation planned this theft. We realized that our conversations might be monitored through electronic surveillance. Sarah hired a security expert who found sophisticated listening devices in both our phones and my car. Douglas had been tracking our every move and hearing our strategy discussions in real time. This level of surveillance requires law enforcement cooperation, the security expert explained. Someone in the sheriff's department is providing technical assistance to your father's conspiracy. The corruption extended beyond courthouse officials to include police officers who should have been investigating crimes instead of covering them up. We were fighting an entire network of criminals who controlled every institution that might deliver justice. Frank's situation became desperate when loan sharks began threatening physical violence if Douglas didn't repay money borrowed against the family farm. Frank called me in terror after finding dead animals scattered around his property and threatening messages spray-painted on his barn. They want their money by Friday, or they're taking the farm and everything on it. Frank explained through tears. Meghan, I've worked this land my entire life. My children grew up here. Douglas has destroyed everything our family built over 4 generations. We realized that Frank's life was in immediate danger since the loan sharks would eliminate anyone who might interfere with their collection efforts. Sarah arranged police protection, but we couldn't trust local law enforcement completely given their obvious corruption. The pressure intensified when Cindy began appearing at public events around town, playing the role of Douglas's devoted girlfriend who supported his fight against his ungrateful daughter. Her performances were calculated to generate sympathy for Douglas, while painting me as a greedy opportunist. That poor man has suffered so much, she told reporters after a town council meeting. First losing his beloved wife, now facing legal attacks from his own daughter. Douglas built that bakery with his own hands, and Meghan wants to steal his life's work. Cindy's acting ability impressed me even as I despised her manipulation. She understood exactly how to present herself as the loyal companion protecting an innocent victim from family betrayal. Her criminal experience had taught her to exploit people's emotions expertly. But Sarah's background investigation revealed that Cindy had made critical mistakes in establishing her false identity. She used the same alias in Colorado that she's using here, Sarah explained. We can prove she's a professional con artist with multiple arrest warrants. The evidence against Cindy would expose her criminal history and establish a pattern of targeting vulnerable widowers. Her involvement proved that Mom's death was part of a larger scheme rather than a spontaneous crime of opportunity. As the inheritance hearing approached, Douglas escalated his media campaign with increasingly vicious attacks on my character and mental stability. He gave interviews claiming that grief had driven me to make false accusations against innocent people. Meghan has always been unstable, Douglas told the newspaper reporter. Patricia worried constantly about our daughter's psychological problems. Now grief has pushed Meghan completely over the edge, and she's inventing conspiracy theories to avoid accepting reality. The public relations assault was designed to discredit my testimony before the hearing began. If townspeople believed I was mentally unstable, they would dismiss any evidence I presented as the delusions of a grieving daughter who couldn't accept her father's legitimate inheritance rights. But Douglas made one crucial error in his propaganda campaign. He claimed that I had never shown interest in the bakery business and had only worked there occasionally during high school. Several longtime customers remembered this differently and began coming forward with contradictory stories. Meghan practically grew up in that bakery, Mrs. Thompson told Sarah during an interview. She knew every customer's name and favorite order. Patricia was training her to take over the business eventually. I remember when Meghan developed that special glaze for the holiday cookies, added Mr. Jenkins, who had been ordering birthday cakes for 20 years. She was maybe 16 years old, but she had real talent for flavor combinations. These testimonials proved Douglas was lying about my involvement in the family business. If we could demonstrate that he was willing to lie about easily verified facts, a jury might question his credibility on larger issues. Sarah compiled testimony from 15 longtime customers who remembered my extensive work at the bakery from childhood through college. Their collective memory painted a clear picture of someone who had been groomed to inherit the business, not someone who had shown no interest in family traditions. But time was running out. The inheritance hearing was scheduled for Monday morning, giving us only 72 hours to prepare our defense against a conspiracy that had been planning this theft for months. We're going into court with evidence of murder, fraud, conspiracy, and corruption, Sarah summarized as we reviewed our strategy. But the judge is part of the conspiracy, so traditional legal arguments won't work. Then what's our plan? Sarah's smile was grim but determined. We're going to force Judge Harrison to expose himself in front of witnesses he can't control. Sometimes the best way to catch criminals is to let them think they've already won. I wasn't sure I understood her strategy, but I trusted Sarah's experience and Mom's evidence. Somewhere in that courtroom, justice would finally have its day, even if we had to risk everything to achieve it. The weekend before the inheritance hearing brought a series of escalating attacks designed to break our resolve completely. Someone sabotaged my car's brake lines, causing me to crash into a telephone pole while driving to meet Sarah. The police officer who responded to the accident seemed more interested in citing me for reckless driving than investigating obvious signs of mechanical tampering. These brake lines were cut with precision tools, the mechanic explained while examining the damage. This wasn't accidental wear or normal failure. But Officer Reynolds dismissed the mechanic's assessment without investigation. "Young lady, you've been under considerable stress lately," Sometimes people imagine conspiracies when they're dealing with grief and family problems. The official report described my accident as driver error caused by emotional distress, ignoring physical evidence of sabotage. The corruption extended through every level of local law enforcement, making it impossible to obtain protection or justice through normal channels. Sarah arrived at the hospital where I was treated for minor injuries and immediately recognized the severity of our situation. They're escalating to attempted murder because the hearing is tomorrow. Someone is desperate to silence us permanently. That evening, Sarah's paralegal called with disturbing news about courthouse security footage. The recordings from Judge Harrison's private meetings with Douglas have mysteriously disappeared from the building's computer system. The security guard claims there was a technical malfunction that corrupted 3 months of data. "Convenient timing for a computer malfunction," Sarah responded sarcastically. "I suppose the backup systems failed simultaneously." "Actually, yes. The security supervisor says multiple equipment failures occurred during routine maintenance last week. All evidence of private meetings in the judge's chambers has been permanently lost." The systematic destruction of evidence proved that courthouse employees were actively participating in the cover-up. Judge Harrison had sufficient control over building operations to eliminate any documentation that might expose his conspiracy with Douglas. Our legal strategy suffered another setback when 3 key witnesses suddenly became unavailable to testify. Betty Rodriguez, the cake decorator, who knew about Douglas's recipe changes, called to say she had been hospitalized with food poisoning. Mr. Kumar from the pharmacy claimed his mother in India was dying, and he had to leave the country immediately. Dr. Morrison's office announced that he was attending a medical conference and couldn't return until after the hearing. "None of these excuses are coincidental," Sarah explained grimly. "Someone has threatened or bribed every witness who might support our case." We discovered that Betty Rodriguez had received a cash payment of $10,000 the same day she was allegedly hospitalized. Mr. Kumar's airline ticket to India had been purchased by a credit card registered to Judge Harrison's wife's consulting business. Dr. Morrison's medical conference didn't exist according to the organization supposedly hosting it. "They're paying people to disappear rather than testify truthfully," Sarah concluded. "Everyone who might expose the conspiracy has been neutralized through bribery or intimidation." The isolation was complete. We would face the hearing without allies, witnesses, or support from any local institutions. Douglas and Judge Harrison had successfully corrupted or intimidated everyone who might challenge their version of events. Sunday morning brought our final devastating surprise. Frank called from the hospital after being beaten unconscious by unknown attackers who broke into his farmhouse during the night. "They said this was a warning about keeping my mouth shut tomorrow," he whispered through broken ribs and a punctured lung. "Did you see who attacked you?" 3 men in masks, but I recognized one voice. Deputy Collins from the sheriff's department. He's the one who told me to stay away from the courthouse if I wanted to keep breathing. Frank's assault proved that law enforcement officers were actively participating in violence to protect the conspiracy. We couldn't trust police protection or rely on courthouse security to prevent further attacks during the hearing. Sarah hired private bodyguards and arranged for federal agents to monitor the hearing, but their authority was limited since we were in state court dealing with local jurisdiction issues. "We'll have some protection, but not enough to guarantee safety if they decide to eliminate us completely," Sarah admitted. I spent Sunday night reviewing Mom's recorded evidence and trying to find strength in her final words. She had known this confrontation was coming and had prepared me for exactly this moment. Her love and sacrifice would not be wasted on fear or surrender. Monday morning arrived gray and threatening, matching my mood as Sarah and I approached the courthouse surrounded by her security team. Media trucks lined the street drawn by Douglas's publicity campaign about fighting his ungrateful daughter's greed. The courtroom was packed with spectators who clearly supported Douglas's narrative. I recognized several people from the casino and others from Judge Harrison's country club, suggesting that attendance had been orchestrated to create an intimidating atmosphere. Douglas sat at the plaintiff's table wearing his best suit and most sympathetic expression, playing the role of grieving widower perfectly. Cindy sat directly behind him in conservative clothing that disguised her true nature, dabbing her eyes with tissues to suggest emotional support for her devoted boyfriend. Judge Harrison entered with theatrical gravity, acknowledging Douglas with a subtle nod before calling the proceedings to order. His confident demeanor suggested someone who expected a quick and predetermined outcome. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to resolve a family dispute regarding the estate of Patricia Edwards, Judge Harrison announced. The court recognizes that emotions run high in these situations, but we will focus on legal facts rather than personal feelings. Douglas's attorney presented their case with polished efficiency, arguing that the handwritten will was invalid due to technical deficiencies and Patricia's alleged mental incapacity during her final months. They introduced fabricated evidence suggesting Mom had been suffering from dementia and depression that clouded her judgment. Patricia Edwards was clearly not of sound mind when she wrote this supposed will, the lawyer argued. Medical records show she was taking medications that affect cognitive function, and her behavior became increasingly erratic during her final weeks. I wanted to scream that those medical records were fraudulent and that Mom's erratic behavior resulted from medication tampering, not mental illness. But Sarah had instructed me to remain silent until our carefully planned moment arrived. The prosecution introduced character witnesses who testified about Douglas's devoted care for his mentally ill wife and his decades of hard work building Sweet Dreams Bakery from nothing. Several people described me as an absent daughter who had shown no interest in the family business until money was involved. Meghan Edwards abandoned her family responsibilities years ago, claimed Mrs. Foster, who I was certain had never met me before this trial. She moved away for college and never came back to help with the bakery. Now she wants to steal what her father built through honest labor. Each false testimony felt like physical assault, but Sarah squeezed my hand and reminded me that our turn was coming. The elaborate lies being presented would make our evidence more devastating when we finally revealed the truth. Judge Harrison seemed to enjoy the proceedings, occasionally asking questions designed to reinforce Douglas's narrative, while dismissing Sarah's objections with obvious bias. His performance convinced me that the ruling had been written before we ever entered the courtroom. Mr. Edwards, can you describe your emotional state regarding your daughter's legal challenge? Judge Harrison asked with theatrical sympathy. Douglas's response was perfectly rehearsed. Your Honor, I'm heartbroken that grief has driven Meghan to attack her own family. Patricia would be devastated to see our daughter destroying everything we built together. I'm willing to forgive Meghan's accusations and offer her a small settlement to help her start fresh somewhere else. The fake generosity was designed to make Douglas appear magnanimous while reinforcing the narrative that I was an ungrateful daughter, motivated by greed rather than justice. Several spectators murmured approval of his supposedly merciful offer. Judge Harrison nodded approvingly. Mr. Edwards, your willingness to forgive family betrayal speaks well of your character. The court appreciates your desire to resolve this matter peacefully. Sarah stood to present our defense, but Judge Harrison immediately established restrictions that would prevent us from introducing our most crucial evidence. Counselor, I will not allow this courtroom to become a venue for wild conspiracy theories or unsubstantiated accusations against respected community members. Your Honor, we have documented evidence of fraud and criminal activity that directly relates to this inheritance case. I've reviewed your filings, and I find them to be elaborate fiction designed to distract from simple legal questions. You may present evidence regarding the will's validity, but I won't tolerate character assassination or paranoid delusions. Judge Harrison's restrictions made it impossible to present Mom's recordings the medical evidence of poisoning or documentation of Douglas's financial crimes. We were being prevented from telling the truth while Douglas was encouraged to lie freely. Sarah attempted to introduce bank records showing Douglas's embezzlement, but Judge Harrison ruled them irrelevant to the inheritance dispute. She tried to present pharmacy records documenting medication tampering, but he excluded them as unsubstantiated speculation. Your Honor, this evidence proves systematic fraud that invalidates any claim Mr. Edwards might have to his wife's estate. Counselor, you're fishing for ways to confuse the jury with irrelevant financial information. This hearing concerns the validity of a handwritten will, not wild theories about pharmaceutical conspiracies. The corruption was absolute. Judge Harrison was using his judicial authority to prevent us from presenting evidence that would expose his own crimes. We were trapped in a rigged system where truth was inadmissible and lies were treated as fact. Douglas's victory seemed assured when Judge Harrison announced his intention to rule immediately rather than taking time to consider the evidence. This case involves straightforward legal principles that don't require extensive deliberation. I felt my last hope disappearing as Judge Harrison prepared to deliver his predetermined judgment. Everything Mom had sacrificed to document would be meaningless if her evidence never reached honest ears. But Sarah had prepared for exactly this moment. She stood with calm confidence and requested permission to make a final statement on behalf of her client. Your Honor, before you issue your ruling, my client would like to address the court personally. She has something important to say about her mother's final wishes. Judge Harrison looked annoyed, but couldn't refuse such a reasonable request without appearing obviously biased. Very well, but keep it brief. The court has heard enough emotional appeals for one day. I stood on trembling legs knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether justice would prevail or evil would triumph completely. In my pocket, I clutched the small recording device containing Mom's dying declaration, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the truth that would destroy their conspiracy forever. The courtroom fell silent as I approached the microphone, every eye focused on what they expected would be my surrender to Douglas's superior legal position. But I had learned something important from Mom's example sometimes. The most powerful weapons are the quietest ones. I was about to whisper 2 words that would change everything. I stood at the microphone, feeling the weight of every gaze in that suffocating courtroom. The overhead lights seemed harsh and judgmental, casting stark shadows across faces that expected my humiliation and surrender. Douglas leaned back in his chair with satisfied confidence while Cindy squeezed his shoulder in a gesture of supportive triumph. Your Honor, I began, my voice steady despite the tremors in my hands. I want to thank you for this opportunity to address the court. Judge Harrison's expression suggested impatience with what he clearly expected to be a final emotional plea before he ruled in Douglas's favor. Several spectators shifted restlessly, apparently eager to witness the conclusion of what they believed was a spoiled daughter's doomed attempt to steal her father's rightful inheritance. When my mother died 3 months ago, I thought I understood grief. I continued looking directly at Douglas. I thought the worst pain was losing someone you love unexpectedly. Douglas nodded sympathetically, playing his role as the understanding father dealing with his daughter's misguided anger. His performance was nearly flawless, conveying both sorrow for his late wife and patience with his troubled child. But I've learned that there are worse things than sudden death. I said, letting my voice carry across the silent courtroom. I've learned that betrayal by someone you trust completely can destroy your faith in everything you believed about love, family, and justice. Judge Harrison cleared his throat impatiently. Miss Edwards, please confine your remarks to relevant legal matters rather than philosophical observations about family relationships. I ignored his interruption and continued speaking directly to the gallery of spectators who had come expecting entertainment rather than truth. I've spent 3 months investigating how my mother really died, and I've discovered things that would shock everyone in this room. Your Honor, I object to this line of testimony, Douglas's lawyer interrupted. The defendant is clearly attempting to introduce inadmissible evidence through emotional manipulation. Sustained. Judge Harrison ruled quickly. Miss Edwards, you will restrict your comments to the inheritance dispute, not wild theories about your mother's death. But I had expected this obstruction and had prepared accordingly. I understand, Your Honor. I only want to say that I accept this court's decision regarding my mother's will. The admission surprised everyone, including Sarah, who had known I would never actually surrender. Douglas's face showed confusion mixed with relief, as if he couldn't believe his victory was being achieved so easily. I realized that family businesses are complicated. I continued maintaining my facade of defeat. Maybe I was wrong to challenge my father's claims. Maybe grief did cloud my judgment and make me see conspiracies where none existed. Cindy whispered something to Douglas, probably advising caution since my capitulation seemed too convenient. But Douglas was clearly enjoying my apparent humiliation too much to question its authenticity. My mother, Patricia, built Sweet Dreams Bakery with love and dedication. I said, my voice beginning to crack with genuine emotion. She poured her heart into every recipe, every customer interaction, every day of operation for 25 years. Judge Harrison nodded approvingly, satisfied that I was finally accepting his predetermined outcome. Miss Edwards, the court appreciates your mature recognition of your father's legitimate rights to his deceased wife's estate. Yes, Your Honor. My father clearly deserves everything my mother built. I paused, letting the irony of that statement settle before continuing. In fact, I think my father deserves exactly what my mother wanted him to have. Douglas's confidence was complete now. He turned to acknowledge supportive murmurs from the gallery, basking in what he believed was his total triumph over his ungrateful daughter. His smugness would make the next few minutes even more satisfying. Your Honor, since I'm accepting the court's ruling in my father's favor, I'd like to share something my mother wanted him to know, I announced, reaching into my jacket pocket. Sarah tensed beside me, understanding that our carefully planned moment had finally arrived. Judge Harrison looked suspicious, but couldn't object to what appeared to be my final gesture of surrender. I withdrew the small digital recording device and held it up for everyone to see. My mother left a message for my father. I think this court should hear her final wishes in her own voice. Your Honor, I object, Douglas's lawyer shouted, finally recognizing the danger. This device hasn't been authenticated or admitted as evidence. Judge Harrison's face flushed with alarm as he realized I wasn't surrendering at all. Miss Edwards, you cannot introduce evidence that hasn't been properly submitted through legal channels. But I had already pressed the play button, and Mom's voice filled the courtroom with crystal clarity. Douglas, I know about the money you've stolen, about your gambling, about that woman. I know you've been planning to take everything after I die, but I've documented every crime you've committed, and Meghan will make sure justice is served. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs as people processed what they were hearing. Douglas's face had gone completely white, while Cindy looked frantically toward the exit as if calculating her escape route. Judge Harrison banged his gavel furiously. This recording is inadmissible. Bailiff, remove that device immediately. But I continued letting Mom's voice play, reaching the most devastating part of her dying declaration. "You think you're clever, Douglas, but I've been recording our conversations for weeks. I have proof that you've been poisoning me slowly by switching my heart medication." Douglas's lawyer lunged toward me, trying to grab the recording device, but Sarah's bodyguards blocked his path. The device continued playing Mom's final words. "Judge Harrison, if you're listening to this, I have evidence of your gambling debts and your conspiracy with my husband. Your corruption ends now." The entire courtroom fell into stunned silence as Mom's voice concluded. "Douglas, you murdered me for money, but my love for Meghan is stronger than your greed. The truth will expose all of your crimes." Judge Harrison was no longer banging his gavel. His face had drained of all color, and his hands shook as he stared at the recording device. The confident corruption had been replaced by obvious terror as he realized his conspiracy was completely exposed. Douglas sat frozen in his chair, unable to speak or move as the full weight of his crimes filled the courtroom. Every person in the gallery understood that they had just heard a murder confession and evidence of judicial corruption at the highest levels. "That recording is fabricated," Douglas finally stammered. "She's lying. My wife died of natural causes." But his protests sounded desperate and unconvincing compared to the calm certainty in Mom's recorded voice. Everyone could hear the difference between authentic emotion and panicked desperation. Cindy was already moving toward the exit when federal agents entered the courtroom, having monitored our planned revelation through Sarah's coordination. "Nobody leaves until this situation is properly investigated," announced Agent Rodriguez, flashing his credentials. Judge Harrison attempted to maintain his judicial authority even as his conspiracy crumbled around him. "This is my courtroom, and I demand that inadmissible evidence be excluded from these proceedings." Agent Rodriguez approached the bench with calm professionalism. "Your Honor, this recording contains evidence of federal crimes, including murder conspiracy, judicial corruption, and interstate fraud. This case is now under federal jurisdiction." The transformation was complete. Judge Harrison's confident corruption had been replaced by the helpless panic of a criminal facing exposure. Douglas sat in stunned silence as the reality of his situation penetrated his shock. Furthermore, Agent Rodriguez announced, "We have been monitoring communications between Judge Harrison and Mr. Edwards regarding bribery and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Additional arrests will be made immediately." Sarah stood with quiet satisfaction as federal agents moved to arrest Douglas and Judge Harrison. "Agent Rodriguez, my client, has additional evidence documenting pharmaceutical fraud embezzlement and the murder of Patricia Edwards through medication tampering." The courtroom spectators watched in amazement as their respected community leaders were handcuffed and read their constitutional rights. The elaborate conspiracy that had seemed invincible minutes earlier was collapsing completely under the weight of Mom's carefully gathered evidence. Cindy made one final attempt to flee, but Agent Rodriguez's team had surrounded the building. Her professional con artist experience hadn't prepared her for federal investigation and arrest. As the three conspirators were led away in handcuffs, I felt a profound sense of Mom's presence surrounding me with love and protection. Her final sacrifice had achieved everything she had planned: justice for her murder, exposure of the corruption that had infected our community, and protection of the family legacy she had died defending. The recording device in my hand had delivered exactly what Mom promised: 2 words that changed everything. But those words weren't the ones I had spoken. They were the 2 words that mattered most. Patricia knew. Justice had finally arrived, carried by the love of a mother who had refused to let death silence her voice. The federal investigation that followed transformed our quiet Indiana town permanently. Agent Rodriguez's team uncovered a corruption network that had been operating for over a decade, involving casino money laundering, pharmaceutical fraud, judicial bribery, and multiple suspicious deaths that were now being investigated as potential homicides. Douglas, Judge Harrison, and Cindy were held without bail as additional evidence emerged daily. Tommy Walsh's death in Las Vegas was reclassified as murder when autopsy results revealed forced injection of lethal drug combinations. The 3 pharmacy employees who had helped switch medications for gambling debts confessed in exchange for reduced sentences. Frank recovered from his injuries and testified about the loan sharks who had threatened his farm. Federal agents arrested Deputy Collins and 2 other Sheriff's Department officers who had been providing security services for illegal casino operations. The corruption reached into state government when Senator Morrison Judge Harrison's brother-in-law was arrested for accepting bribes to influence gaming legislation. Sweet Dreams Bakery was immediately returned to my ownership through emergency federal court orders. The first thing I did was restore Mom's original recipes and rehire every employee Douglas had fired. Betty Rodriguez cried with joy when I asked her to resume creating wedding cakes using the premium ingredients Mom had always insisted upon. "Your mother would be so proud," Betty told me while preparing a 3-tier anniversary cake with real vanilla extract and Belgian chocolate. She always said this place was about spreading happiness, not just making money. The bakery's reputation recovered quickly as word spread about returning to traditional quality standards. Customers who had stopped visiting during Douglas's cost-cutting period came back eagerly grateful to taste the familiar flavors they had missed. Within 2 months, daily sales exceeded previous records as the community embraced our restored commitment to excellence. Sarah Martinez was appointed special prosecutor to handle the ongoing corruption cases. Her fearless investigation led to convictions that sent shockwaves through Indiana's political establishment. 12 public officials, 6 business owners, and 23 casino employees ultimately faced federal charges ranging from conspiracy to murder. Your mother's evidence broke open the largest organized crime network in Indiana history, Sarah explained during our final legal meeting. Her courage saved not just your inheritance, but probably prevented dozens of future victims from facing similar conspiracies. Dr. Morrison testified for the prosecution after being granted immunity in exchange for complete cooperation. His detailed medical testimony proved that Mom's death resulted from systematic poisoning designed to mimic natural heart failure. The sophisticated nature of the crime required coordination between Douglas Pharmacy employees and medical records falsification. Patricia Edwards was murdered through one of the most calculated schemes I've encountered in 30 years of practice, Dr. Morrison admitted on the witness stand. Her killers used medical knowledge to commit the perfect crime, except they underestimated her intelligence and determination to protect her family. Judge Harrison received a life sentence without parole after being convicted on 17 federal charges, including conspiracy to commit murder, judicial corruption, money laundering, and racketeering. His decades of accepted bribes and manipulated verdicts had affected hundreds of families who would now have opportunities to appeal their cases. Douglas was sentenced to death by lethal injection after his conviction for premeditated murder conspiracy and 12 counts of fraud. During the sentencing hearing, he finally showed genuine emotion, weeping as he realized that his greed had cost him everything, including his life. "I never meant for Patricia to die," he sobbed before the judge. The medication switching was supposed to make her sick enough to sign documents, not kill her. Everything got out of control. But the prosecutor presented evidence proving Douglas had researched lethal dosages and cardiac medication interactions, demonstrating clear intent to commit murder rather than simple incapacitation. His tears came too late to generate sympathy from anyone who understood the calculated nature of his crimes. Cindy received 25 years in federal prison after her conviction for conspiracy to commit murder and her role in 4 similar schemes across different states. Investigators discovered that she had helped target and kill at least 7 elderly victims over the past decade, stealing approximately $2 million through inheritance fraud and life insurance scams. Frank inherited Douglas's share of the family farm after his brother's conviction, allowing him to pay off debts and restore the agricultural operation to profitability. He became one of Sweet Dreams Bakery's most loyal suppliers, providing fresh eggs and dairy products that enhanced our commitment to local ingredients. Justice feels good, but it doesn't bring back the people we lost. Frank reflected during a family dinner at the farmhouse. At least now their deaths have meaning, and other families won't face the same tragedies. The pharmaceutical fraud investigation led to nationwide reforms in prescription monitoring and pharmacy security protocols. Tommy Walsh's murder and the systematic medication tampering shocked healthcare professionals into demanding stronger safeguards against internal corruption. Mrs. Chen Mom's best friend helped me establish the Patricia Edwards Foundation for Family Justice, a nonprofit organization that provides legal assistance to families facing estate fraud and suspicious deaths. The foundation's mission is preventing future tragedies by educating people about warning signs and connecting them with resources for protection. Your mother always said that love is stronger than greed, Mrs. Chen reminded me during the Foundation's first benefit dinner. She proved that even death couldn't stop her from protecting you and exposing evil. The Foundation has already helped dozen families across the Midwest identify and prosecute inheritance fraud schemes. Sarah serves as chief legal counsel, using her experience from our case to guide other families through complex investigations and federal proceedings. Sweet Dreams Bakery has expanded beyond Mom's original vision while maintaining her core values of quality, community, and compassion. We've opened a second location in Indianapolis and begun offering baking classes that teach traditional techniques to home cooks who want to create restaurant-quality desserts. The original location features a memorial wall honoring Mom's legacy, displaying photos from 25 years of birthday parties, wedding receptions, and community celebrations that were sweetened by her creations. Customers often pause to read the tribute describing how her love and sacrifice protected our family business and exposed dangerous criminals. But the most meaningful testament to Mom's memory is the transformation that occurred in our community after her truth was revealed. People began questioning corruption they had previously ignored, demanding transparency from elected officials, and supporting families who faced similar injustices. The courthouse where Judge Harrison had manipulated justice for so many years now displays a plaque dedicating the building to honest legal proceedings and equal treatment under law. His replacement, Judge Patricia Williams, was specifically chosen for her reputation for integrity and fairness. "Your case changed how our entire judicial system operates," Judge Williams told me when she visited the bakery. "Every court employee understands that corruption will be exposed and prosecuted to the fullest extent of federal law." On quiet Sunday afternoons when the bakery is closed, I sometimes sit in Mom's office reviewing the recipes and business plans she left behind. Her handwriting fills notebooks with ideas for seasonal specialties, customer appreciation events, and community partnerships that demonstrate her vision for Sweet Dreams Bakery's future. In those peaceful moments, I feel her presence most strongly guiding my decisions and encouraging my efforts to honor her memory through excellence and service. The love that motivated her sacrifice continues inspiring every aspect of our daily operations. The recording device that exposed the conspiracy sits in a place of honor on Mom's desk, reminder that truth is more powerful than any criminal scheme. Her dying declaration saved not just my inheritance, but potentially dozens of future victims who might have faced similar betrayals. 2 years later, Sweet Dreams Bakery has become more successful than ever, proving that integrity and quality will always triumph over shortcuts and corruption. We employ 23 people who understand that their work contributes to something larger than individual profit. We're spreading the joy and comfort that Mom believed every family deserved. The final lesson from our ordeal is that love creates legacies that transcend death itself. Mom's courage in documenting her murderer's crimes ensured that justice would eventually prevail, even when the entire system seemed corrupted beyond repair. Her sacrifice taught me that fighting for truth requires patience, preparation, and unwavering determination to expose evil, regardless of personal cost. Sometimes the most powerful weapons are indeed the quietest ones, a mother's love recorded for posterity whispered at exactly the right moment to change everything. Every morning when I unlock the bakery doors and smell the aroma of fresh bread rising in Mom's original ovens, I'm reminded that some victories are worth any price. Justice delayed isn't justice denied when love provides the evidence needed to make truth prevail completely. Douglas thought he could steal everything Mom built and escape consequences through corruption and intimidation. But he underestimated the power of maternal love to reach beyond death and protect the family legacy he tried to destroy. In the end, those 2 words, Patricia knew, delivered exactly the justice Mom had planned. Her love proved stronger than his greed, her truth more powerful than his lies, and her sacrifice more meaningful than his selfishness. Sweet Dreams Bakery continues spreading the happiness Mom always envisioned, serving families who understand that some recipes can never be replicated because their most important ingredient is love itself. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely was deceiving you in ways you never imagined? Share your thoughts in the comments below about how families can protect themselves from inheritance fraud and betrayal. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe for more true stories about justice prevailing over corruption. Don't forget to share this with anyone who needs encouragement that truth and love can overcome even the most elaborate criminal conspiracies. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and may you always find the strength to fight for what's right, no matter how impossible victory might seem.